Admiral Velthar leaned back in his command chair, his four eyes scanning the latest intelligence reports from the human sectors. The alien warrior had fought in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy, crushing civilizations that dared to challenge the mighty Zoranian Empire. But these humans were different. They were amusing. "Look at this nonsense," he growled to his aide, waving a clawed hand at the datapad. "The humans are broadcasting about some super weapon they call the Titan. They claim it's bigger than our largest battle stations." His mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. "These primitive creatures think they can scare us with fairy tales." The Zoranian commander had studied human psychology extensively. They were known for their wild stories and impossible boasts. During their short time in galactic politics, humans had claimed to have invented faster-than-light travel independently, discovered new forms of energy, and now this ridiculous tale about a massive warship. It was clearly desperate propaganda, designed to make their enemies think twice before attacking. Meanwhile, billions of kilometers away, Captain Han Sol Kim sat quietly at his monitoring station aboard Orbital Defense Platform 7. The space around him hummed with the constant chatter of encrypted communications. His job was to listen, to watch, and to make sure their enemies heard exactly what they wanted them to hear. Han Sol smiled as he watched the alien communication networks light up with discussions about human claims. The Zoranians were sharing jokes about the Titan with their allies. The Kethmori were analyzing the fake technical specifications that human intelligence had carefully leaked. Even the hive-minded Eschatar were dismissing the reports as typical human deception. Perfect. Everything was going according to plan. The captain adjusted his headset and continued monitoring the channels. Every few hours he would allow another, carefully crafted piece of misinformation to slip through their supposedly secure networks. Technical readouts that were just believable enough to seem real, but just impossible enough to be dismissed as fantasy. It was a delicate balance, but one that human intelligence had mastered over decades of preparation. Deep in the asteroid belt, far from prying sensors and curious observers, Lieutenant Nari Park made her final rounds of the construction site. The massive structure before her defied imagination. After 40 years of secret construction, using resources gathered from across human space, the project was finally nearing completion. Nari checked each sensor dampener personally. These devices created false readings that made the construction site appear to be nothing more than empty space filled with ordinary asteroids. Any alien scout ship passing through the area would see exactly what the dampeners wanted them to see: ordinary space rocks tumbling through the void. The lieutenant had been born on this construction site. Her parents had worked here, and their parents before them. 3 generations of her family had dedicated their lives to this moment. The massive ship floating before her represented humanity's greatest achievement, built in absolute secrecy, while the rest of the galaxy remained unaware. Every rivet, every circuit, every armor plate had been crafted by human hands and human ingenuity. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The legend they dismissed as myth was about to become their worst nightmare. The message arrived at exactly 800 hours, Earth Standard Time, across all human diplomatic stations simultaneously. Ambassador Jinwoo Lee was enjoying his morning coffee when the priority alert flashed across his terminal. What he read next made his blood run cold. The Tri-Alliance had formed overnight. 3 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had put aside centuries of rivalry to unite against one common target: humanity. The Zoranians brought their military might, the Kethmori their advanced technology, and the Schatar their overwhelming numbers. Together, they represented the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Their ultimatum was simple and brutal. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender all colonies beyond the Sol system, submit to alien oversight of Earth's government, and accept permanent second-class status in galactic affairs. Any refusal would result in immediate military action. Jinwoo had been a diplomat for 20 years. He had negotiated trade agreements, resolved border disputes, and even prevented 2 small wars through careful discussion. But as he read the alien demands, he knew this was different. The tone of the message made it clear that negotiation was not really an option. The aliens had already made their decision. He tried anyway. For 3 days, Jin Woo worked around the clock, reaching out to every contact he had built over 2 decades of diplomatic service. He offered trade concessions, technology sharing, even limited territorial adjustments. But the alien response was always the same: complete surrender or total war. The Zoranians laughed at his proposals. The Kethmori analyzed his offers with cold mathematical precision and found them insufficient. The Siskatar simply buzzed their rejection through their hive mind communication system. They wanted humanity broken, not bargained with. Commander. So Young Choi was 3 light-years from Earth when her frigate sensors detected the massive alien fleet gathering at the edge of human space. She had been conducting a routine patrol mission, checking automated sensor buoys and investigating minor shipping irregularities. Nothing in her 15-year military career had prepared her for what she saw. The enemy fleet stretched across space like a metal constellation. Zoranian dreadnoughts bristled with weapons designed to crack planetary surfaces. Kethmori cruisers gleamed with technological perfection, their hulls covered in sensor arrays and exotic weapon systems. SS Qatar swarm ships moved in perfect coordination, thousands of smaller vessels operating as a single deadly organism. So Young's tactical computer struggled to count them all. Every few minutes, more ships dropped out of hyperspace, adding to the already overwhelming force. Her frigate could maybe handle 3 or 4 enemy vessels in a fair fight. The aliens had brought over 10,000. She transmitted her report to Earth immediately, knowing it might be her last communication. The enemy had positioned long-range sensors throughout the system, tracking every human ship and defensive installation. There would be no surprise attacks, no clever tactical maneuvers. This would be a straight fight between overwhelming alien numbers and whatever humanity could muster in response. Back on Earth, military commanders received So Young's intelligence with grim acceptance. They had always known this day might come. From the moment humans first encountered alien life, military planners had prepared for the possibility of interstellar war. But even their worst-case scenarios had not imagined an alliance this large or this determined. The Galactic Council observed from their neutral space stations, ready to record humanity's final chapter. Most expected the war to last hours, not days. After all, what could one young species do against the combined might of 3 galactic powers? They had no idea what humanity had been building in secret. Dr. Hyun-Woo Kang had been studying gravitational physics for over 30 years. His research station orbited a neutron star, giving him access to some of the most extreme gravitational fields in the known galaxy. He thought he had seen everything the universe could throw at him. He was wrong. The reading started as a small blip on his long-range sensors. At first, he assumed it was just another asteroid or piece of space debris drifting through hyperspace. But as the object continued moving, the gravitational distortions around it grew stronger and stronger. Soon his equipment was detecting ripples in space-time itself. Hyun-Woo rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the display again. According to his instruments, something was moving through hyperspace that was creating gravitational effects normally, associated with small moons. But moons didn't travel through hyperspace, and they certainly didn't move in perfectly straight lines toward specific destinations. He ran a full diagnostic on his sensor array. Everything checked out perfectly. He recalibrated the gravitational detection equipment twice, then a 3rd time. The readings remained consistent. Something impossibly massive was out there, and it was moving with purpose. The Kethmori scientist pulled up the database of known vessels. The largest ship ever built was the Zoranian super dreadnought World Breaker, measuring just over 8 kilometers in length. Even that massive warship barely registered on gravitational sensors unless you were practically on top of it. But this object was creating distortions visible from light years away. His calculations suggested the mystery object was nearly 50 kilometers long. That was larger than most space stations. It was larger than some asteroids. According to every engineering principle known to galactic science, it should be impossible to build something that large and expect it to hold together under its own gravity, let alone move through hyperspace. Across the galaxy, other sensor Stations were picking up similar readings. The Eschatar HiveMind computational network detected the anomaly and spent precious processing power trying to analyze it. Their conclusion was that it must be some kind of natural phenomenon, perhaps a rogue asteroid with unusual mineral composition that was affecting sensor readings. The Xeranian military's deep space monitoring stations also registered the disturbance. Junior technicians filed reports about unusual gravitational waves, but their commanding officers were too busy preparing for the invasion of human space to pay attention to what seemed like minor sensor glitches. Even neutral observers were detecting the anomaly. Scientists from a dozen different species compared notes through academic channels, trying to understand what they were seeing. The most popular theory was that it was a previously unknown type of dark matter formation. Some suggested it might be an ancient alien artifact drifting through space. A few wild theorists even proposed it could be some kind of massive living creature. Nobody seriously considered that it might be a ship. Admiral Velthar was in his element. The Xeranian commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching. Tactical displays show the positions of over 10,000 Allied vessels. This was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, and he was in overall command. His name would be remembered forever as the general who finally put the upstart humans in their place. When his sensor officer approached with reports of unusual readings, Velthar barely glanced at the data. Gravitational anomalies were common in deep space. Hyperspace travel itself created all sorts of strange effects on sensitive equipment. He had more important things to worry about than sensor ghosts and equipment malfunctions. The Admiral's attention was focused on the tactical situation ahead. Human colonies were scattered across 3 star systems, defended by a handful of outdated frigates and some orbital defense platforms. His fleet would sweep through them like a storm, crushing any resistance before the humans could even mount a proper defense. The mysterious readings were filed away in the ship's database and promptly forgotten. After all, what could possibly threaten the largest military force in recorded history? The attack began at dawn on New Geneva, humanity's furthest colony world. Captain Jae-min Song was drinking his morning coffee when the proximity alarm started screaming. Through the viewport of his destroyer, he watched as alien ships dropped out of hyperspace like angry hornets pouring from a disturbed nest. All hands to battle stations, Jae-min ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. His small squadron of 6 destroyers was all that stood between the civilian population and complete annihilation. Against them came over 300 enemy warships, their hulls gleaming with the promise of destruction. The math was simple and brutal. Each of his ships would have to face 50 enemies. Under normal circumstances, a human destroyer could maybe handle 3 or 4 alien vessels in a fair fight. But these weren't normal circumstances, and this definitely wasn't going to be a fair fight. Jae-min opened a channel to the planetary evacuation centers. "You have 2 hours," he told the evacuation coordinator. "We'll buy you whatever time we can, but get those transports moving now." He knew it wasn't enough time. It would take at least 6 hours to evacuate the planet's 2 million civilians, but 2 hours was all he could promise. His squadron spread out in a defensive formation, their weapons charging as the alien fleet approached. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. Jae-min's flagship shuddered as enemy plasma bolts struck his shields. He returned fire, watching with satisfaction as his missiles found their mark on a Xeranian cruiser. For 90 minutes, the human ships fought like cornered tigers. They used every trick in the book, every tactical maneuver their training had taught them. They fired from behind asteroids, used debris fields for cover, and coordinated their attacks. With desperate precision, one by one though, they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Jae-min's destroyer was the last ship standing when the evacuation transports finally lifted off from New Geneva's surface. His ship was crippled, his crew reduced to half strength, but they had bought the civilians the time they needed. As enemy fire finally broke through his failing shields, the captain smiled. 2 million people would live because of what his squadron had done here. Back on Earth, Admiral Seung-ho Park watched the tactical displays with growing horror. Red markers appeared across the holographic map as human colonies fell one after another. Each marker represented millions of lives, entire worlds that had taken decades to build and mere hours to lose. The outer rim colonies were gone within the first day. The middle colonies lasted slightly longer, but not by much. The alien advance was methodical and unstoppable. They would arrive in overwhelming force, crush any resistance and move on to the next target. It was less like a battle and more like a natural disaster sweeping across human space. Park staff officers provided constant updates, but the news never got better. Tau Ceti has gone silent, sir. We've lost contact with the Centauri defense. Grid. The Vegan colonies are requesting immediate evacuation support. Each report was another nail in humanity's coffin. The Admiral had commanded Earth's defenses for 15 years. He had planned for this scenario countless times, run simulations and war games until his staff was sick of them. But all his planning had assumed they would face one alien civilization at a time, not three working together. The enemies combined. Fleet was simply too large to fight with conventional tactics. With trembling hands, Park opened a secure communication channel that he had hoped never to use. The connection was so heavily encrypted that it took several minutes to establish. When the channel finally opened, he spoke the words that would change everything. Authorization Omega-77. Begin Project Prometheus Awakening sequence immediately. Deep in the asteroid belt, Director Yeon-Soo Kim received the codes she had dreaded seeing for 50 years. She had spent her entire adult life overseeing humanity's most classified project, knowing that if these codes ever came, it would mean their species was facing extinction. But they had prepared for this moment. For 5 decades, they had built and planned and hoped they would never need to. Use what they had created. Now as alien fleets swept across human space like a plague, it was time to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The awakening had begun. Deep in the asteroid belt, something that had slept for decades began to stir. The fusion reactors of the UES Prometheus came online one by one, each ignition creating a controlled star within the massive ship's hull. The sound was like thunder rolling through metal corridors that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Captain Do-hyun Lee felt the familiar tingle of the revival process as his cryopod systems brought him back to consciousness. Around him, 99,000 other pods were going through the same awakening sequence. The soft hiss of opening chambers filled the massive revival bays as humanity's most elite crew members returned to life after their long sleep. Do-hyun had been 25 when he entered cryosleep. Now, 30 years later, he was still 25. The same was true for every crew member aboard the Prometheus. They had sacrificed their normal lives, their families, their futures, all for this one moment. Each person on this ship had been selected from millions of candidates and trained from childhood for a single purpose: to crew humanity's ultimate weapon when the time came. As the captain made his way to the bridge, he passed through sections of the ship that defied imagination. The Prometheus wasn't just a warship, it was an entire civilization contained within a single hull. Agricultural decks stretched for miles, capable of feeding the entire crew indefinitely. Manufacturing centers could produce everything from spare parts to entire fighter squadrons. Living quarters housed not just crew members but their families, children who had been born in space and knew no other home. The ship's AI, known as Guardian, had been monitoring galactic communications during the crew's sleep. Its synthetic voice echoed through the corridors as systems came online. Captain Lee, all primary systems are operational. Weapons systems are charging to full capacity. Propulsion is ready for activation on your command. Engineering Chief Mi-young Cho stood in the primary reactor chamber, watching displays that showed the incredible forces being contained within the ship's hull. Each of the Prometheus's 12 fusion reactors was more powerful than anything humanity had ever built before. Together they could power a small planet or provide enough energy to crack continents in half. The reactor chamber was a cathedral of technology, with massive conduits carrying power to every corner of the ship. Mi-young had designed many of these systems herself, spending decades perfecting fusion technology that was generations ahead of anything the aliens possessed. The Prometheus didn't just use more advanced technology, It used technology that shouldn't have been possible. As the great ship's engines came to life, space itself began to react. The Prometheus was so massive that it created its own gravitational field, strong enough to pull asteroids from their orbits. Chunks of rock and ice that had drifted peacefully through space for millions of years suddenly found themselves drawn toward the awakening giant. The ship's movement sensors detected the gravitational disturbances spreading outward like ripples. In a pond, what had once been empty space filled with ordinary asteroids was now revealed as the hiding place of humanity's greatest achievement. Sensor dampeners that had concealed the construction site for 50 years were finally shut down. Captain Do-hyun reached the bridge and took his position in the command chair. Around him, his crew worked with the precision of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Every station was manned by experts who knew their systems better than anyone else in human space. Through the massive viewports, Do-hyun could see Earth in the distance, a small blue dot barely visible against the star field. Somewhere beyond his sight, alien fleets were destroying human colonies and killing millions of innocent people. The enemy thought they were fighting against a weak young species that could be easily crushed. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The Prometheus was fully awake now, its massive hull humming with barely contained power. 50 years of preparation, 5 decades of humanity's greatest minds working in secret, had created something that the galaxy had never seen before. The myth that alien intelligence officers had dismissed as human fantasy was real, and it was ready for... War Guardian's voice filled the bridge one final time. "All systems operational, Captain. The Prometheus is ready for combat." Do-hyun smiled grimly as he gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "Take us to Earth. It's time to show our enemies what humanity is truly capable of." The Tri-Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system with all the confidence of predators approaching wounded prey. Admiral Velthar stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the tactical displays show the positions of his 10,000 vessels. This would be the final blow, the moment when humanity's brief time as a galactic species came to an end. "Begin long range." "Scans," Velthar ordered his sensor officers. "I want to know the position of every human ship, every defense platform, every orbital station. We'll crush them all in one decisive strike." The sensor returns began flowing in, painting a picture of humanity's desperate last stand. A handful of destroyers and frigates were arranged in defensive formations around Earth. Some orbital weapons platforms hung in high orbit, their guns pointed uselessly toward the approaching alien armada. It was exactly what Velthar had expected, a token resistance that would be swept aside in minutes. Then something appeared on the sensors that made no sense at all. "Sir," the sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief, "I'm reading a massive gravitational disturbance near Jupiter. Something is moving behind the gas giant, something big enough to affect the planet's orbit." Velthar frowned and moved to look at the display himself. The readings showed an object of impossible size emerging from Jupiter's shadow. At first he assumed it was some kind of sensor malfunction, or perhaps a large asteroid that had been disturbed by the fleet's arrival. But as the object continued to move, its true nature became undeniably clear. It was a ship. A ship larger than anything that should have been possible to build. The Prometheus emerged from behind Jupiter, like a mountain moving through space. Its hull stretched for nearly 50 kilometers, bristling with weapon systems that looked like cities built on its surface. Massive engine clusters at its rear glowed with barely contained fusion fire. The ship's very presence seemed to bend space around it, creating gravitational effects that registered on every sensor in the solar system. Captain Tae-ho Lim commanded the small human defense squadron positioned near Mars. He had been preparing for what he assumed would be a heroic last stand, knowing that his 6 destroyers would be completely outmatched by the alien fleet. But when the Prometheus appeared on his sensors, his jaw dropped in amazement. Tae-ho had worked on the construction project for 5 years early in his career, helping to install armor plating on what he had been told was just one small section of the ship. Even then, he had been amazed by the scale of the project. But seeing the completed vessel for the first time was beyond anything his imagination had prepared him for. The ship was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its hull was covered with geometric patterns that served both aesthetic and functional purposes, providing maximum structural strength while deflecting enemy sensors. Weapon turrets the size of office buildings tracked potential targets across the battlefield. Fighter bays that could launch entire squadrons were barely visible as small dots along the massive hull. "My God," Tejo whispered to his bridge crew. "We actually built it. After all these years, we actually built it." Across the alien fleet, panic was spreading like wildfire. Junior officers stared at their sensor displays in disbelief, running diagnostics and recalibrations, hoping their equipment was malfunctioning. Senior commanders tried to maintain order, but their voices betrayed their own shock and fear. The Zoranian fleet had brought their largest dreadnoughts, ships that had conquered dozens of worlds, but even their most powerful vessels looked like insects next to the Prometheus. The Kethamori had prided themselves on technological superiority, but the human ship displayed engineering capabilities that exceeded their wildest theories. The Sektar hive mind, which had never known fear, suddenly experienced an emotion it had no name for. Admiral Velthar gripped the railing of his command platform, his knuckles white with tension. For the first time in his long military career, he understood what it meant to be completely outmatched. The human myth that his intelligence officers had dismissed as fantasy was real, and it was approaching his fleet with obvious hostile intent. The balance of power hadn't just shifted, it had been completely reversed. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were about to face humanity's ultimate expression of technological might and determination. The Prometheus continued its approach, and with each passing moment, it became more terrifyingly real. The age of alien dominance was about to end, and a new chapter in galactic history was about to begin. The first shot from the Prometheus lit up space like a newborn star. Captain Do-Hyun Lee watched from his command chair as the massive ship's primary weapon system engaged for the first time in actual combat. The main mass driver, a weapon so large it ran through the entire length of the ship, accelerated a projectile to nearly 20% the speed of light. The tungsten slug, No, bigger than a coffee table but moving at relativistic speeds, struck a Zoranian dreadnought dead center. The alien warship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a kilometer-long vessel bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment, it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and debris. "Primary target eliminated," reported weapons. Officer Hae-Jin Kim from her position at the tactical station. She had spent 15 years training for this moment, running simulation after simulation until she could coordinate the Prometheus's weapon systems in her sleep. But no simulation had prepared her for the awesome reality of the ship's destructive power. Hae-Jin's fingers moved across her control panel with practiced efficiency. The Prometheus carried over 3,000 individual weapon systems, from the massive main guns down to point defense lasers, designed to stop incoming missiles. Each weapon required precise targeting and timing to be effective, and coordinating them all was like conducting a deadly orchestra. "Targeting enemy command vessels," she announced, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Firing secondary batteries." A dozen smaller mass drivers spoke in unison, hurling projectiles toward the alien fleet at incredible speeds. Each shot was aimed at a different target, carefully selected to maximize damage to the enemy's command and control structure. Within seconds, 6 more alien ships disappeared in brilliant flashes of destruction. The Tri-Alliance fleet tried desperately to return fire. Thousands of missiles streaked through space toward the Prometheus, their warheads designed to crack planetary surfaces. Energy beams powerful enough to melt asteroids lanced out from alien weapons, but the human ship seemed to swallow their attacks without even noticing. The Prometheus's point defense system was a marvel of human engineering. Thousands of laser turrets tracked incoming missiles with computer-assisted precision, destroying them long before they could reach the ship's hull. The few projectiles that managed to get through were absorbed by adaptive shielding that could disperse energy across the ship's massive surface area. A group of desperate Zoranian captains attempted a ramming attack, accelerating their ships directly toward the Prometheus at maximum speed. But as they approached, the human ship's gravitational field began to affect their vessels. The Prometheus was so massive that it generated its own gravity well, and the attacking ships found themselves pulled off course and into each other instead of their intended target. Captain Do Hyun watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The enemy fleet was massive, but it had been designed to fight conventional battles against conventional opponents. The Prometheus was anything but conventional. It was a weapon of war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and the aliens were learning that lesson the hard way. "Status report," Do Hyun ordered. "All systems nominal," came the reply from engineering. "Shield generators operating at 12% capacity. No hull damage detected. Ammunition reserves at 98%. The captain nodded grimly. They had barely begun to fight, and already the enemy was in full retreat. Some of the alien ships were trying to escape to hyperspace, while others continued their futile attacks against the Prometheus's impenetrable defenses. Through the bridge viewports, Do Hyun could see the battle raging around them. Explosions lit up the darkness as alien ships died by the dozens. The Prometheus moved through their formations like a shark through a school of fish, its weapons, reaching out to touch enemy vessels with deadly precision. This wasn't really a battle at all. It was a demonstration. For 50 years, humanity had prepared for this moment, building a weapon that could stand against any threat the galaxy might throw at them. The aliens had dismissed human capabilities as myths and fantasies. Now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The Prometheus continued its methodical destruction of the Tri-Alliance fleet, and with each enemy ship that died, the balance of galactic power shifted further toward humanity. The age of human submission was over. The age of human dominance had begun. The first crack in the Tri-Alliance appeared 2 hours into the battle. Admiral Kethvar of the Kethmori fleet watched in horror as another wave of his ships disintegrated under the Prometheus's devastating firepower. His species prided themselves on logic and calculated decision-making, and the calculations were crystal clear. They were all going to die if they stayed. "All Kethmori vessels, execute tactical withdrawal," he broadcast on the encrypted command. "Frequency. Form up on my position and prepare for hyperspace jump." The Kethmori ships began pulling back from the battle, their sleek hulls gleaming as they tried to put distance between themselves and the human dreadnought. They moved with precise coordination, their advanced technology allowing them to retreat, in perfect formation. But even as they fled, the Prometheus's long-range weapons continued to pick them off one by one. Some of the Kethmori vessels made it to the edge of the system and jumped to hyperspace. Others weren't so lucky. The human ships' targeting computers tracked them with relentless efficiency, and massive projectiles crossed the void to destroy fleeing ships just moments before they could escape. The Eschatar reacted differently to their impending doom. Their hive mind couldn't process the concept of retreat or surrender. Instead, driven by collective desperation, they launched wave after wave of suicidal attacks against the Prometheus. Hundreds of their smaller ships accelerated to ramming speed, hoping to damage the human vessel through sheer numbers and determination. The attacks were brave but futile. The Prometheus's point defense systems had been designed to handle exactly this kind of swarm assault. Laser turrets tracked the incoming ships with mechanical precision, destroying them by the dozens before they could get close enough to do any damage. The few vessels that managed to reach the human ship's hull simply shattered against armor plating that was meters thick. The sight of the Eschatar suicide runs had a devastating effect on Zoranian morale. These insectoid aliens had never shown fear in battle, had never retreated from any fight. If the hive mind was resorting to desperate kamikaze attacks, it meant the situation was truly hopeless. Admiral Velthar stood on his damaged bridge, watching, his life's work crumble around him. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed by a single enemy vessel that seemed unstoppable. His flagship shuddered as another hit from the Prometheus's secondary batteries punched through his failing shields. "Sir, we're taking heavy damage," his first officer reported. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. The engine room is reporting critical failures." Velthar closed his eyes and made the hardest decision of his military career. He had never surrendered in battle, had never even considered the possibility. But watching thousands of his ships die around him, he realized that pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. "Open a channel to the human vessel," he ordered. "All frequencies, maximum power." The communication went out across the solar system, reaching not just the Prometheus, but every ship in both fleets. News networks across the galaxy picked up the transmission, broadcasting it to billions of viewers who were watching humanity's last stand turn into something completely unexpected. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Velthar of the Zoranian Empire." His voice cracked with emotion. We surrender. Our forces will cease all hostile actions immediately. Please, show mercy to my remaining crews." The response from Captain Do-hyun, Lee was broadcast on the same open frequency, ensuring that every alien in the system and countless observers across the galaxy could hear humanity's reply. "Admiral Velthar, you came here to test humanity's resolve and break our spirit." Do-hyun's voice was calm but carried an edge of cold steel. "You brought the largest fleet in galactic history to destroy our home and enslave our people. Consider our resolve tested. Consider your assumptions proven wrong." The Prometheus continued its methodical destruction even as the surrender message echoed through space. Zoranian ships that tried to flee were hunted down and destroyed. Eschatar vessels that continued their attacks were eliminated with ruthless efficiency. The human captain had made his point clear. There would be no mercy for those who had come to commit genocide. In less than 6 hours, the most powerful military alliance in recorded galactic history had been reduced to scattered survivors and expanding debris fields. The Tri-Alliance was broken, their combined fleets shattered by humanity's ultimate weapon. The galaxy would never be the same. The news spread faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every corner of the galaxy. Within hours, every major civilization knew what had happened in the Sol system. The impossible had become reality, and the entire galactic order had shifted in a single day. On Centauri Prime, the ruling council watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. The Centaurians had always considered themselves the galaxy's premier military power, with a fleet that could challenge any single opponent. But watching the Prometheus systematically destroy 10,000 ships made them realize how naive they had been about human capabilities. The Altarian Federation called an emergency session of their parliament. These peaceful traders had built their civilization on the principle that economic power was more important than military might. But economics meant nothing when your potential enemy could build ships the size of small moons. They immediately began drafting new trade proposals that heavily favored human interests. Even the ancient Vegan Empire, oldest civilization in the galaxy, found themselves reconsidering their position. For thousands of years, they had maintained their superiority through accumulated knowledge and technological advancement. The humans had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries, yet they had created something that surpassed Vegan engineering by orders of magnitude. Ambassador Jinwoo Lee hadn't slept in 3 days. His office was flooded with diplomatic requests, trade offers, and what could only be described as outright bribes from civilizations desperate to get on humanity's good side. The same species that had ignored human diplomatic overtures for decades were now competing with each other to offer the most attractive deals. The hegemony of Rigel offered exclusive mining rights to their asteroid belts. The Tau-Cetian Confederacy proposed a mutual defense pact that heavily favored human interests. Even the isolationist crystal entities of the Magellanic Clouds had broken their millennium-long silence to send messages of greeting and respect. Jinwoo's assistant brought him another stack of priority communications. "Sir, the Andromedan Trade Union is offering to share their hyperspace navigation technology. The Wolfpack Federation wants to discuss military cooperation. And She paused, checking her notes. "The High Council of Arcturus is offering to make humanity a permanent member with full voting rights." The ambassador rubbed his tired eyes. 6 months ago, humanity had been considered a minor species, worthy of little attention. Now, every major power in the galaxy was scrambling to avoid being seen as a potential threat to human interests. The transformation was so complete it felt surreal. Back on Earth, Director Yeon-Soo Kim stood in her secure facility, watching as construction began on 3 new shipyards. The success of the Prometheus had proven that humanity's approach was correct, but one ship wasn't enough to secure their position permanently. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and other species might eventually develop countermeasures to human technology. Project Hercules is approved for immediate construction, she announced to her senior staff. Begin resource allocation for the second Titan-class vessel. Project Achilles will follow 6 months later, and Project Odyssey will begin construction next year. The engineering challenges were enormous. Each Titan-class ship required the resources of multiple solar systems and decades of construction time. But humanity had learned the value of thinking big. The aliens had dismissed them as primitive, because they couldn't imagine the scale of human ambition. Captain Do-hyun Lee guided the Prometheus back to its hidden base, but secrecy was no longer necessary. The ship's existence was now known throughout the galaxy, and that knowledge was perhaps more powerful than the vessel itself. The mere fact that humanity could build such a thing had changed everything. The real question now wasn't whether humanity could defend itself, that had been answered decisively. The question was what humanity would do with its newfound position as the galaxy's newest superpower. Would they become conquerors like the Zoranians? Would they retreat into isolationism like so many other advanced species? Or would they find a third path, using their strength to create something better than what had come before? The entire galaxy was watching, waiting to see what humanity's true character would reveal itself to be now that they no longer had to hide their capabilities. The such age of human underestimation was over. The age of human responsibility had begun.